Barbara Leach from ShopRite. When will ShopRite frozen food managers get paid the same as other ShopRite department managers for doing the same job? Barbara, there are different rates of pay. There are different levels in different contracts. There are some contracts where the frozen food managers are indeed at a department manager's rate of pay, for lack of a better word. There are other contracts where there is a premium attached to it. The premiums vary from contract to contract as well. However, our ShopRite contracts will all be up in 2021, and I would encourage you and any other frozen food manager that's interested when the time comes in trying to serve on the committee. Any department manager, as far as the union is concerned, that does the job of a department manager should be compensated accordingly. It's not something that we don't agree with. It's just not a very easy thing to attain during bargaining. That being said, we encourage any and all participation to try to grow that category each step of the way. Gus Rendon, any guidance on Gus from Mandel in, I think, 566 in Manhattan, if I'm not mistaken. Any guidance on workers' compensation due to contracting COVID-19 at the job? Do punches help out? It was like a blizzard, hurricane scenario for almost 2 weeks. Gus, the labor movement has been the absolute hammer trying to push all COVID-related death or illness through the Workers' Compensation Board. For obvious reason, every and all facets of the government are trying to push back. Insurance companies are going to push back. They want proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is not that type of situation. I can tell you that it is not the easiest thing in the world to try to get pushed through, but every central labor body in New York, as well as all active local unions, are all pressing for the same thing. It hit the municipal unions significantly harder than it hit some of the private sector unions, but the public sector unions, as well as the central labor bodies, are leading the charge, and we are absolutely on board. To the best of my knowledge right now, there is no resolution, but it's one that we're all steadily working on. Diane DiMartino Busser, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Why did the compensation for COVID stop when it's still a national threat? In New York, we can't dine indoors. The courts are closed. The county clerk is closed, yet we remain open as an essential business. However, you stopped hazard pay. Again, Diane, I just reiterate something I said earlier. No one at this union stopped hazard pay, period. From our perspective, you should all be getting it every single day, and you should get it until the crisis is averted. We completely agree with you, but it's not something that we independently can control. We represent you, but you're employed by your company. We are still under contract, and we've done everything we can as far as filing charges with the National Labor Relations Board. We'll keep you up to date as it continues. Paul Anderson, I want to see the minimum hours for part-timers raised. Too many managers give the bare minimum, which amounts to a pittance. Yeah, that's pretty obvious, Paul. If your employers don't recognize the value of part-timers now, after what all of the part-time workforce did throughout COVID, I don't think they ever will. The question is whether or not they'll ever admit to it when they're outside the closed room and they're writing their budgets. As hard as our full-time workforce is, there are 2 out of every 10 employees in most companies, and everybody worked their asses off, overtime, 12-hour shifts, 13-hour shifts, in many cases coming back to work with less than 8 hours between shifts, doing all things that we would ordinarily frown upon as your representative, but understanding that all those things were done because it was a pandemic, because it was a unique once-in-a-lifetime crisis. Well, there should be a reward on the backside. And to Paul's point, if I was a halfway decent store manager, I'd be fighting like hell to give the people that helped me keep my store up, I'd be giving them as many hours as I possibly could. For the record, most of your employers are telling us that it's back to business as usual. Come on, that's just bullshit, and we all know it. It may not be COVID rush, it may not be COVID crush, you may not have 33 to 45% increases year over year, but we all know you're still doing really well. How are you still doing the same store sales without certain categories? You're doing it because the volumes are up. Baskets are still up. Every time somebody makes an asshole comment on a news outlet or a media or a prediction, bang, the stores get pounded again. It's the never-ending participle. It just keeps paying off. So, Paul, I do agree with you, and I fully exercise and understand that frustration, and we hope that some of the store managers and the district managers release the purse strings a little bit where they can to give our part-timers the reward they so justly deserve. Any other questions that had come in during? Nothing on the feed?
Just the toy drive. There's someone who's questioning, are we having a toy drive this year?
I would say this to you, as it relates to the toy drive, we will contact John Thiessen. Jay Scorzelli's been our contact with the John Thiessen Foundation for probably 10 years at this point. Yeah, maybe even more than that. I don't want to undercut how long he's been working on it. But Jay will definitely be in contact with John Thiessen. And then honestly, if there's some difficulty in one capacity, we may look for an alternative as well. We've in the past done stuff with Marty Lyons, with Toys for Tots. We will try to do whatever we can to figure it out, but COVID kind of creates a little bit of a concern as it relates to that. If you think about how many hands the toys are going through, then they end up here, and it does potentially create a liability. So we'll talk that through, and I do appreciate the interest. It's a very important cause that we'd love to continue to support if we can. Dan Augustine, do I have to quarantine when I come back after leaving the state in King Cullen? I would tell you to call your employer, Dan. The mandates, depending on what state you go, say that you should remain in quarantine. However, the rules for a quarantined employee that's an essential worker are different than the rules for a non-essential worker. We've had issues with returning employees where it's become a very difficult situation at store level. So I would tell you, without knowing where you're going, that you should get in contact with your store and have that conversation either before you leave or before you come back, so you know what the rules of the game are. And if you have a question or an issue with that, depending on who your representative is, you should reach out to them. Okay? Anything else?
That's the last bunch of them.
That was all the
What are the rules for the essentials? Kathy Brawley, I believe the rules for the essentials state that you can come back and you can come back to work, provided you maintain complete and total social distancing. And I believe you are supposed to quarantine everything outside of work. You're supposed to remain home at all times. You're highly encouraged to get a test. You should, in all cases, if you even have the slightest of symptoms, not report to work. That may or may not be all of them. I'm not 100% sure. Am I missing one there, Tony's our resident rules committee. He spends a lot of time ensuring that we're not missing much. I believe that does encompass all of them, Kathy. That can easily be found by searching the New York State Governor's website. They can give you a little bit more specifics on it, I believe. Oh, lost that. I have no idea what that just said. When will department heads be recognized as managers, since we are doing the work of a department manager and higher pay? Laureen, I don't know where you work, but I kind of covered that conversation a little bit earlier. Different contracts have different rules in them. They have different thresholds. There are certain contracts that have minimum volume requirements before a department manager needs to be recognized from a rate of pay perspective. There are other contracts where there are specified department managers and other departments that do get premiums. Typically, we have to do all of those things during a contract negotiations. Robert Costelli, when are we going to the proposal meeting? Robert, I don't know that we're going to be able to do any type of a proposal meeting that's not virtual. So I would tell you that when we know, you'll know. But no matter what, Robert, it's going to be a very different situation. Doing a Zoom with more than 100 people is incredible. Trying to do a Zoom with more than 100 people is borderline impossible. Representing 7,400, 7,500 Stop and Shop employees makes that an impossibility. So we have to try to find any way, shape, or form that we can to do these things. In addition, we would have to ID and check people in, so it's a little bit of a longer process than it should, than it would normally be, forgive me. How do I get my coworkers to wear their mask properly and not on their chin, Cindy? Listen, we don't enforce the rules. That's not what the union does as it relates to our own members, but every member who's on the shop floor should wear their mask. It's easy for me to say as I sit here, not being in the same circumstance that you are, but people have a right to do the things they want to do, Cindy. It's a difficult situation. We would highly encourage everyone to wear their mask every day and to do the best they can on the sales floor to wear it right, but at the end of the day, I don't know how to tell you to deal with that one in particular employee. Joe O'Callahan, call Juan Gordato about your issue in Arvern. I'm sure he'll be happy to help you. Bakery leads should be managers. I agree, Katie Tikas. Allison Nielsen, your rep will get in contact with you to deliver your gift card.
Congratulations.
Sandy Funicello Bracco, if you're a long-term employee and get election day off, if it falls on your regular day off, do you get an additional day besides? I believe so, but just confirming, yes. Full-time mandatory work week in a holiday week is 32. Anything beyond that is overtime. On a part-time side, if you get election day off, you should get another day off, but if you are a variable employee, I don't know that there's a big spike in business on presidential election day. It's never fallen on the radar as one, so it shouldn't be an issue. If it is, Sandy or anybody else out there, please reach out to your rep. Okay. Mike Nass, what are we supposed to do when store manager tells us, don't tell customers to wear their masks, it's not our job? Well, Mike, I'm going to say two things to you. Your rep's name is Jeff Guardato, not Joe Waddy, so you should start texting Jeff Guardato during the meetings and not the EVP, and you know better. But the reality is, Mike, you have a right to ask a customer to put on a mask, but if your employer is telling you not to do so, then you should be letting us know, and then your rep, Jeff Guardato, the same guy I just referenced that you should be texting, will get on your store manager and he'll try to make sure that that situation is resolved by a manager. No matter what, it should be a no mask, no service rule, but your company doesn't enforce it the same way most others don't. That's an issue for us to address. You shouldn't take matters into your own hands. It could be deemed insubordinate, especially if you've already been given a direction by your store manager. Hopefully that answers your question.